I'll show you how I use my joiner and planer to square up lumber and work pieces by going through some examples of current projects I'm working on. I've got 3 different situations. First is this piece of rough sawn pecan. Second is this crazy bowed piece of maple that I'm going to try to salvage from the scrap bin. And finally is this just glued up cutting board. Let's start with this cutting board. It's a raw glue up and it's not too far off from level, but since this will sit flat on a countertop, even the slightest twist will be noticed, and just sending it through the planer as is will not get the twist out. So the first step is to flatten one side on the jointer, setting the depth of cut very shallow, only about a 1/64 of an inch. This is a 10-inch wide joiner, and having a wide joiner definitely is a benefit for pieces like this. After a few passes, it's starting to become all flat. So now I have one side completely smooth and flat, and it's customary to mark it with this little fish-shaped curlicue so that I can keep track of it. The next step is to square up one edge relative to the face that I just flattened. I'm making sure to put the side that I just surfaced up against the fence, and I'm using the same depth setting as earlier. This piece is wide enough, I could just hold it without a push block. However, the fence on most joiners is really not very tall, and I like putting a little pressure kind of in the center of the fence. Puts my hand a little close to the blades, so I often prefer using a push block. Okay, now that edge is smooth, flat, and perfectly square to the face, and I mark it with the customary arrow so I don't lose track of it. Now to surface the other side parallel to the one we already did, I'm going to take it over to the planer, with the side that has the curly fish pencil mark down. I set the depth of cut very shallow, and I'm really cautious on this first pass because there may be high points back here somewhere. And after several passes, now both sides are flat, smooth, and parallel to each other. Moving on to the table saw, with the edge that I jointed earlier up against the fence, I just shave off a little bit on the other edge to get it straight and square. And to square up the ends, I'm using the crosscut sled. Now all 6 sides of this piece are perfectly flat, straight, and square to each other. I pulled this piece out of the scrap bin at the local hardwood lumber store, and it's a mess. Not only is it extremely bowed, the lumberyard planer chewed it up pretty good. But I think it has the potential to be a pretty piece of maple, and I want to try to salvage it. So there'd be no way to flatten this board as a single 4-foot long piece. There would just be nothing left of the board if I tried that. So I'm going to use it for a project panel that'll be 18 inches long and 10 inches wide. I rough cut it down to about 20 inches in length, and you can see each of these pieces still has a bow in them, but much more manageable at this point. And I need to start with the joiner because the planer will not get a bow out of a board. Here's an example. It's a piece with a similar bow in it. And as I run it through the planer, you can see it just curls through. And now the board is thinner, but it's still bowed. First step is to flatten one side, and I pick the side that has the bow down. On the first couple of passes, I press very gingerly on the leading edge so that that edge doesn't drop down and stick as it goes into the outfeed table. And once I've established enough of a flat surface on the leading edge, then I can apply a nice even pressure and a few more passes until the board is entirely flat. And I just repeat the same for the second workpiece. Note that I always use push blocks here. I don't want my hands directly on the workpiece just in case it were to break or maybe I slip or something going through. I don't want my hands that close to the cutter. I like this push block with the heel on it. It just feels less likely to slip as I'm pushing it through. Next is to clean up one edge 90 degrees square, so I put that face that was just flattened against the fence. And run each piece through a few shallow passes, and now that edge is smooth, straight, and square. So now onto the planer to get the other side flat and parallel to the one that I just flattened on the joiner. I'm initially pretty cautious with the depth setting because the bow in these boards, the thickest part is in the center of the board. I was so cautious that the rollers didn't even grab the second board initially. And note that I want both of these boards to end up the same thickness, so I run them through together on each pass. I'm using the table saw now with the previously jointed edge up against the fence, and I'm just trimming up the other edge to get the maximum width. So I'm gluing these together to get the board that I need for my project, and I'm really happy with the fit. My final example is this rough sawn piece of pecan. Buying rough sawn lumber can also often save you money, or in this case I actually cut this piece myself from a log that would have otherwise been firewood. Flattening one side is again the first step. And after a bunch of passes through, the pencil marks are finally all gone. This edge has kind of a straight cut from the bandsaw, but not really square and smooth. So now with the flat side up against the fence, I square up that edge, and now one face and one edge are done. I'm doing the other side on the planer, same as the other pieces. I really didn't mean to take so deep of a cut on the first pass, really too deep, but it worked out. And it only took a couple of cleanup passes and it was done. With three sides flattened and squared up, next would be to cut to the width that I need for my project on the table saw. And in this case, I'm probably going to cut it into two narrow boards and discard the strip with the crack in it. But I want to give it some more thought. I'm going to use it on the project, so for now I'll just say thanks so much for watching.